Welcome back to the two-part series we started last week, where we brought clarity and simplicity to the 9 levels of submission as a foundation for the next step, the formula. Because today I'm using an anonymous patron's BDSM test results to reveal my revolutionary system for discovering your BDSM personality and finding a compatible kinky partner. If you haven't already watched last Sunday's video, I highly recommend you do so because you will be slightly lost if you try to jump in today without that foundation. And that foundation was the 3 main categories of subtypes: bottom, submissive, and slave. And you can see the primary differences up here on the screen. Again, to watch how we were able to define these 3 categories, check out last week's video, the 9 levels of submission. But right now we're actually going to table that as we jump into the first part of my system for determining your DS compatibility, the BDSM test. Now this is very common. Pretty much every patron that I've welcomed into my community is familiar with this test in one way, shape, or form. We actually have a channel just for this test on my Discord, and I would advise you and your partner to take this test first. And you can do so at bdsmtest.org. And be sure to take the full test for the most thorough results to use for our compatibility system. Because step 2 is to find the switch. It's crucial to identify if you and or your partner is a switch, because that will greatly affect the interactions within your dynamic and how you play. In this example, our submissive is an 84% switch, which indicates that he enjoys topping only about 20% of the time, whereas 80% of the time he would prefer to be in a bottom role. Step 3, determine if each trait is top or bottom. After you identify the switch point, if any, go through each trait and label it as a top or bottom. Now, such traits like experimentalist, voyeur, exhibitionist, etc. that you'll find on the BDSM test are neutral and can be a top or bottom trait, and I've indicated that later on in this video. But in this example, our subject identified with 8 submissive traits, 0 dominant traits, and 5 neutral traits. And this is very, very telling, especially when it comes to our next step, is you're going to line them up and look for themes. Now, you're going to basically just list out all of the top traits in one row and all of the bottom traits in another row, and you're going to look for themes and patterns, okay? So as we're looking for themes and patterns here in this example, the first thing you may be thinking is, well, where's the switch point? He scored 84% switch, but there are no dominant traits. Where's the switch point? Well, what theme or pattern does that show us? Our subject scored 98% voyeur, 95% experimentalist, and 61% exhibitionist, meaning that if and when he does switch into a top role, it's not for the purpose of dominance, but for erotic and sexual exploration. And that's what I'm talking about when I'm saying look for these patterns, look for these themes. Do you see how when we're just mindful and present and we're organizing our thoughts this way, we're lining things up in dominant, in submissive, and we're seeing, okay, these are top traits, these are bottom traits, these are dominant traits, these are submissive traits, and we're looking for patterns. Patterns will emerge, and that is the pattern that we find most predominantly here, which brings us to step number 5, which is to circle your roles that you got from the BDSM test on the subtype chart that we discussed last week. Remember that chart that I showed you? Well, you are now going to find your submissive roles from the test and circle all that apply on the chart. And again, this is going to start to reveal another pattern. And yes, again, this system, this entire system, including this chart, is available to download at patron.com/LXerotica. But after we have circled all these things on our subtype chart, then step number 6 is to plug this into the equation. So now you're going to use the subtype chart with your sub roles to determine your ideal dynamic and partner with the following formula. Subtype plus structure type equals ideal dynamic or partner. So let's take a look at a few examples. First of all, our subject is a switch. Now, finding enjoyment in a 24/7 slave situation is very unlikely for a switch. And although our subject scored 80% slave, the rest of his results indicate that he is more fetish-centric in his desires. Do you see that pattern here? So it shows me that he's fetish-centric in his desires versus surrender-motivated, which allows him to find fulfillment not in levels 7 through 9, which is more surrender-based, but more around the 4 to 6 range, which is actually a balance of the two, which is additionally confirmed by the fact that he scored 80% slave, indicating that being a bottom on a scene-to-scene basis wouldn't be completely fulfilling either. So the sweet spot that we land in is that middle range. Therefore, if we plug in his subtype, submissive, levels 4 to 6, plus his ideal structure, definitely more than scene to scene, okay, we find that his most compatible types of partners would be sadistic degrader, primal dominant, or dominant rigger. So that is the beauty of this system. It can be replicated to assess your specific desires and compatibility at any time and with any partner or partners. So just go over to patron.com/LXerotica to start using this system in your lifestyle and dynamic. And if you found this content helpful, hit like and subscribe if you haven't already. Click that notification bell so you'll never miss a post, and comment below with any questions you would like me to answer in an upcoming video.